I'm Jennifer Johnson. And I raise sheep for their wool.
Here at Whispering Pines Farm, we raise a small flock of Shetland sheep in western New York State with the goal of producing soft, crimpy wool for hand spinners. Thank you for liking this video and subscribing to our channel. We are in the middle of summer here on the farm. The lambs are growing fast, and we are enjoying this time as we get to know them and think about what they will contribute to the goals we have set for our farm. Each little lamb is special to us, and they all deserve care and attention to ensure they will thrive through the hot summer months. It's a good time to check in with the lambs now. They're about 3 months old, and they're starting to get their own personalities. They're starting to develop and kind of fill out their frame so you can get a better sense of what they're going to look like as an adult. Getting a little bit more wool. So it's time for a check-in. What I want to do is I want to go through each lamb, talk about them and kind of some of my impressions about them. And then I'm also going to take you through some genetics. So it can get a little deep into the subject, but I think it's interesting, and I think it's kind of a fun aspect of this, the breeding sheep process, that you can, take something that you learned in 7th grade and apply it. So I enjoy it, so I'm going to take you through some things. And what I want to do is explain what we learned about the parents of lambs based on what the appearance of the lamb is. So many times I can go take a sheep, let's say I want to know what their genes are. I can go and look at its parents and do a survey of all the lambs they've had and get a pretty good feel for their genetic makeup on the things that I am familiar with and know how to analyze. But it's really fun to, especially with white adults, white parents, to take a look at the lambs and see what you can learn about the parents just from that particular offspring. So we're going to do that as well. So in 2023, this is 2024, but in the fall of 2023, we bred 14 ewes. And all but one had lambs. I know this because lambing season came and those all, they had lambs. I don't do like sonograms at any point during their pregnancy or try to identify if they're pregnant or not, because we don't do stuff like a lot of times bigger farms will modify the feed, or they'll do different things with a ewe if she's bred, only has a single, or has twins or whatever. So but we aren't really at that scale, so it's really irrelevant for us. One of the ewes had a miscarriage, Rosine. So in March, I actually went out and saw the miscarriage, and then she had kind of like a wet backside. We had the vet out and just made sure everything was okay, and she was fine. So it wasn't meant to be. It's no big deal. We set up the breeding groups November 26th, which is Thanksgiving holiday here in the States, and we have a long weekend, so we used one of the days to set the groups up. November 26th, we broke them down January 7th, 2024, and I've got like 2 videos to talk about breeding sheep and using rams for breeding as opposed to doing AI. So broke them up on the 7th, which is a lot later than we normally do. So that gave them 42 days. That gave the ewes 42 days in with the rams. And that is 2.5 cycles. So they cycle every 17 days. They come into heat during the time that they could come into heat, which is only in the fall. Again, part of that breeding video. So this gave them 2.5 cycles. So they're not all in. I don't do seeders to get them all cycling at exactly the same time. So all of them could be at different points in their cycle when I put them in there. So it's kind of like this, sort of a spectrum, I guess. So we used 3 different rams this year. We actually used rams. We didn't do artificial insemination this year. And the selection process for the ewes we used and the rams was, we wanted to pick parents that were going to give us lambs that gave us high yield fleeces for hand spinners to enjoy. So that's a really specific goal, which is nice because it makes it really easy to pick the correct breeding stock. So when I talk about yield, and I've talked about this in other videos, but I think it bears repeating, there's 3 things that I can quantify that allow me to select the correct sheep to get a high yield fleece for a hand spinner. That is the wool that's underneath the coat that I can harvest and offer to a hand spinner for her to enjoy. They produce wool on their neck that I can't use because it's not under the coat, it's dirty. They produce wool on their britch that I don't offer to hand spinners because typically that little bit off the backside is a lot different quality. It's a little coarser than the wool under the coat. Crash course there. But the 3 qualities that I am hoping to improve is staple length, density, and body length. And all 3 of those, if I have a ewe that's got larger numbers of all 3 of those things, when you think about it, if I'm putting the same amount of hay into all the ewes, but that particular ewe, for whatever reason, I don't know the genetics behind these traits, but for whatever reason, she's producing more wool under the coat because she's got a longer staple, and staple is like the length of the hair to from the base to the tip. That's the staple. And it's wool, obviously, but just to give you an idea. So longer staple, denser, more wool per square inch. And there's actually a lamb out there this year, and she's got they call it open if it's not really dense, which means like if the wind blows on it, it would actually blow open. You could see her skin. But a good dense fleece does not get affected by the wind. It's so compact because you have so much more wool per square inch. So that's the other quality I desire. And then the third one is longer body. So the premium wool is where the neck ends to right at the tip of like right where the tailbone is on a person. And if that particular sheep has a longer body, I'm going to get more wool. So all I have to do is buy a bigger coat to cover that wool, right? But if she's got that nice long body, that's going to give me more wool per ewe for the same amount of inputs I put into a ewe that's got a short little body. So hopefully that makes sense. That's what I'm breeding for. That's how I selected the sheep I used this year for breeding. That's what I'm looking at all year, like right now even. I've already identified one ewe that's got that open fleece. But I'll be parting their fleeces when I can get a hold of them. You know, I'll be obviously looking at the crimp. You know, we'll do an evaluation of the ram lambs in September where I'll send in really small fiber samples. But it gives us enough data that we'll be able to decide which ones we're going to overwinter and which ones will go to market. Getting ahead of myself here. But anyway, so that was our hope and goal. So the first ewe to have a lamb, and actually before I even get into that, I want to do a quick crash course in sheep. They call it color genetics. It's about the genetics that determine what the sheep looks like. I don't know, it's called color, but there's more things to it than just the color. So the first thing I want to do is I want to cover some terms I'm going to be using. I am by no means a genetic expert, but I think I understand 3 traits that there's enough information that we know about the genetics. And those are the 3 I'm going to talk about. But the terms I'm going to be using, the first term I'm going to use is the word allele. And the allele, one of the 2 forms of a gene found in the same place on a chromosome. So sheep have a certain number of chromosomes. I think it's 17. Why don't I just Google it? How many chromosomes? Oh, here's one. Do humans have? I don't know. Let's find out. 46, 23 pairs. I wish I'd have guessed that before because I thought that's what it was. All right, how many chromosomes do sheep have? 54, 27, so more. I like that. Okay, so on those chromosomes, whatever did I say, 54, there's little spots on them all that determine certain traits, all sorts of stuff. You know, their health, their resistance to parasites, their sex. I don't know. I mean, there's just like lots and lots of different traits, characteristics, behavior maybe. I don't know. Temperament might be something. Eye color maybe. Who cares about eye color, but it might be one. All right, so those alleles, there's 2 of them one from each parent that they inherit, and that determines what they are as it relates to that particular gene. So for example, spotting. There's two alleles for spotting, spotted and not spotted. So not spotted is a uppercase S. Spotted is lowercase s, and that's because spotted is recessive, least likely to occur when matched with the dominant, and non-spotted is dominant. Gene, that's the section of the chromosome that contributes to certain traits, and the three that I am going to talk about and feel comfortable with are the color, whether they're spotted or not spotted, and their pattern. So a lot of genes have the reason, this is the reason why I don't understand some of them and why some of them haven't even been identified, is that it's possible, there are some traits that are determined by multiple locations, multiple genes on a chromosome. So for example, hornness has multiple places that determine what his horns are going to look like, or hers. And so I know for sure there's one location where it's horned or not horned, and it's just the two alleles. And not horned is dominant. I did a slide deck on horned genetics if you want to look at that. But then there's things like, do they have buttons? Do they have skers? And then there's the whole thing about male and female. So there's a lot of different areas on a chromosome for certain genes that determine certain types of appearances. That makes it more complex. All right, a phenotype. The phenotype is, the way I describe it is, it's what they look like. So if a sheep has two recessive alleles, they're going to look like that recessive trait. If they have a dominant and a recessive, they're going to look like the dominant. If they have a dominant and a dominant, they're going to look like the dominant. So a sheep can have a phenotype that looks like the dominant, but the genetic, the genotype, would be uppercase S, lowercase s, for example, with spottedness. So the genotype is what their genetic makeup is, what those two genes are that are combined to make them look like what they look like. Homozygous is another term I'm going to use, and that's when both the alleles are the same. So what that is most important is if they're homozygous for the recessive trait, they're going to express that recessive trait. So spottedness. If you see a spotted sheep, you know they're homozygous for spotting. They have to be, because that's a recessive trait. Heterozygous is always going to be when you're talking about a sheep that has a dominant and a recessive allele. They're always going to look like the dominant, but the question is, do they carry that recessive or not? If they don't, they're called homozygous. But if they do, it's a recessive. And that's where it's interesting, because that's when you don't know what they're going to throw, because they carry these weird little recessive traits. Alleles, I mean. All right, so I wanted to cover that. Now, the three genes that I'm familiar with as it relates to appearance of sheep. One is the color, and it's really simple. There's two alleles, black or brown. Black is dominant and brown is recessive. They both happen to start with B, so they're symbolized with an uppercase B for black and a lowercase b for brown. Then there's spotting, and there's two for that one, spotted or not spotted. And spotted is recessive, lowercase s. Not spotted is dominant, uppercase S, and that one always confused me. I think it's because I used to like spots, so I'm like, why wouldn't that be that? But it isn't, so spotted is recessive. Now when you get to pattern, a little more complicated, because you got 5 possible alleles. And remember, there's always 2 alleles per sheep. With these 5 genes, sometimes some of them are codominant, so they can express together, which is interesting. I'm not real comfortable talking about that, but it's just a cool thing. So in pattern genetics, the white is always going to be the dominant pattern. And this should make sense to us when we think about all the sheep in the world, how many of them are white. But in a merino flock, once in a while, a black one pops up. And that means that that particular sheep was no pattern in the pattern genetics, but in color, it was black. So a lot of the white sheep you have still have either a black or a white base. And that's where it's fun to train. Another thing, if you have white sheep, to figure out what their other genes are is always fun. Tan, gray, or agouti. I don't have agouti in my flock. We sort of eliminated it a few years ago. And that's just my personal preference. I prefer to have fleeces for my hand spinners that are the most deep and intense of a color. So a goodie is when there's a, like if it's a gray sheep, black and white fibers sprinkled in together so that from far away they look gray. I don't know, I just don't really, I don't see the point of that. I feel like if you're a hand spinner and you want a gray fleece, you want a gray color, you're going to take black wool and then blend in as much white as it takes to get you to the gray that you want. Having said that, I do have gray sheep in the catnugget pattern, which the catnugget pattern I love for two reasons. Number one is it always seems like the catnugget pattern has very fine wool. I don't know why. It might just happen to be the particular sheep that are in the gene pool that have made their way over here. That's how they were. I don't think there's a correlation between catnugget and fineness, but I don't know. And I also like the range of color in a catnugget that you can get from very dark charcoal to very white, silvery gray in one sheep. I just think that's really cool. Gullmugget is another pattern, and I don't talk about that often either because I kind of worked that out of the flock many years ago for sort of the same reason why I love the catnugget. I could never get really nice fine fleeces out of the gullmugget stock that I have. And I feel uncomfortable saying that gullmuggets aren't fine. I'm sure there's some farms that have figured it out, cracked the code. But we never were able to, and so I just sort of gave up. Because, I mean, you're getting, with the gullmugget, you're getting the light on the bottom, dark on the top, and slightly different and very interesting facial markings. But I figured rather than knocking my head against the wall, trying to make sure I have a gullmugget contingent in my flock, I just kind of gave up on it. Because my laser focus is on the hand spinner and producing fleeces that are a very reliable. I want to be like the McDonald's, right? I want people to know what they're going to get when they get a fleece from me. So if you got a fleece from me last year and you get a fleece from me this year from a different ewe, it should be pretty similar in terms of quality, crimp, fineness. I think that people want to, if they want to make that a negative, they call that a cookie cutter. It's not. Everybody, they're all a little bit different. If you saw my skirting videos, they're all within this tolerance range. But there's enough difference in there that it's still fun and interesting. Then my favorite is the no pattern. So there's actually a pattern called no pattern. We also call it solid, which is a little bit misleading because white is a solid color, but that's not the pattern. So I call it no pattern, and the codes are AWT for white. I'm only going to do the ones that I have in my flock. AB for catnugget and AA for no pattern. I love no pattern because it is all one color, and it's the dark version. So it's the black or the brown when you get no pattern sheep. And then there's spotting. Not spotted is the dominant. And again, when you think about all the sheep in the world, most of them are not spotted, so that makes sense. And then spotted is the lowercase s, the recessive allele. Recessive gene. Now there's other genes that determine appearance in sheep. I'm not as comfortable with them, so I don't go into them. One of them is called the extension gene, and I'm really uncomfortable with it. I don't understand it 100%, but there's a lot of effort to keep that gene out of the United States because what it does is it covers pattern, spots, and ends up just giving you sheep that look like no pattern. And I think that breeders in North America want to be able to better control those things, so they don't want the extension gene over here. Again, like I said, I don't really get it. But it's there, and it has a location on the chromosome, and it affects what the sheep looks like. The modifier gene is another location. It's M, uppercase M, lowercase m, so there's only two possibilities. And it takes your brown wool and it turns it fawn. So it's not brown and white together like a goody to look fawn. It's actually the wool color. And we've had, I think I probably have a couple modified ewes in the flock right now. The color I really like is called Miyoget. It's like a golden honey color. It's really pretty. But the Shayla and the Emsket on the brown or the black base side are also modified colors. They're very desirable. I've really not had a whole lot of luck getting them. So, and I really don't know, this is another thing I don't know that I'd love to find out one day when I have a few minutes, and that is what the gray catnugget, if you're looking at the color wheel on that poster, what the gray catnugget is. Is it gray, Emsket, Shayla? I don't know. All right, so that's our crash course in genetics. Now let's talk about Mabel's ewe. I just love that little girl. So Mabel's ewe, who was the first lamb, she was born without any help. We walked out to the barn and there she was. We were out there pretty soon after she was delivered. Single, female. She was born on April 21st, so exactly 147 days from the day that they went in together. So Mabel got pregnant right away. So had we known that, I guess one of the things that would be good about doing this on her, I could have pulled her out of the breeding group, but it doesn't hurt her to be in there. So she was successfully fertilized in the first cycle on the first day. So when we take a look at Mabel's lamb, we bred Mabel to Duncan. So the first one I want to look at is Duncan himself. Duncan is a spotted fawn catnugget ram. That's his phenotype when I describe him. So what we know is because he is fawn, he's brown based, so he is homozygous for the recessive allele or gene brown. He's also spotted, so he's homozygous for spotting. He appears catnugget. What I don't know is, what does he carry? He could carry catnugget. He could be homozygous for catnugget, and he could carry no pattern, but I don't know. His parents are both catnuggets, so he should be homozygous for catnugget for the most part, but there is a chance he's not because Yuki carries no pattern because her sire was no pattern. So I don't know if Duncan carries no pattern or if he's homozygous for catnugget. But when we look at Mabel's lamb, who's also brown, lowercase b, both the recessives, she's spotted, but she's not a catnugget. She's no pattern. I know this because she's brown all the way. She doesn't have the dark on the bottom, light on top. She doesn't have that badger face with the angry eyebrows and a lighter face with dark features. So she is a no pattern. So what that tells us is that Duncan must carry no pattern, otherwise she could not be a homozygous for no pattern. And she's got to be homozygous for no pattern because no pattern is the most recessive of all the patterns. So we know now that Duncan carries no pattern. So we learned something about Duncan thanks to this little lamb, which I think is super cool. So this lamb is Moret, which I was really happy about because I don't have a lot of Moret in my flock. When we take a look at my distribution of color, let's get to that quickly here. I have 71 ewes in the barn right now, including the ewe lambs, 8 ewe lambs. And of those 71, 22 are gray. They're all gray catnuggets. So that's a higher proportion of any of the other colors. Now, that could be okay because I think gray is a really popular color, but there's a part of me that wants it to be more evenly distributed. I don't know why, I just do. So I have 11 Morets. I have, well, one more Moret than I had before, thanks to this little lamb. I didn't get any other Morets this year. I have 22 gray. I have 15 white, which is a big uptick from where I was last year because I got 3 white ewes last year in breeding, and I got 3 white ewes this year. So white fleeces are really popular. White fleeces are popular because people like to dye them. And you can dye fawn and gray, but the outcomes aren't certain. But if you're a regular dyer and you know your dyes and you're dyeing white wool, for the most part, you can pretty much be sure what you're going to get. So that's people like white for that reason. And also white is a nice color to knit with. Black, on the other hand, is a very polar. People either love it or hate it. And usually spinners that don't knit like to spin black fleeces. And spinners that are going to be knitting their stuff tend to shy away from them. Not always, but it just seems like that's the case. What they say is it's difficult to see your pattern, your knitting patterns with black fleeces. So if you're doing any kind of cabling or, you know, anything like that, or Aran sweaters or anything, it's hard to see. So the black is not as popular with knitters. And then I have 15 fawn fleeces, which I think is a good number. But I guess I just feel like I would like a little bit more morat and a little bit less gray. So with this morat ewe, I could breed her in 2 years. I don't breed lambs. And the reason I don't breed lambs is because Shetlands calves they take like 3 years to get to maturity. And I can see that. I can point out the yearlings versus the fully grown. Not this year, because the yearlings this year are the artificial insemination and they're enormous. That's the UK genetics. But you can see the progression, at least in our genetics. So I feel like if you breed a lamb, a ewe that's 12 months old, well, she won't be 12 months at that point. She'd be like 8 months old. You're shortchanging her, and I think it's possible that she won't thrive. It's a risk that she might not get to her full potential. And I don't know if that's true or not. I just feel like it's not giving her a fair shot. So I usually let the lambs go another full year to their, 18 months. And then breed them then. But then they also have to meet a weight requirement. They have to be at least 50 pounds, I think is what we do. I might have gone up to 60. So I could, in the next couple of years, but we'll see. We'll see. I mean, if she's enormous, then for sure. And if she's, well conditioned, very likely. Because both of her parents have really great, fine, dense, great yield fleeces. And so that, she's got a lot of potential there for meeting the goal I had of that high yield fleece with the fineness that I like and the crimp that I like. So she's kind of the full package. And she's just super friendly too, just like her mother. Mabel's really friendly, and this little lamb was very engaging, lots of personality. She was cute as heck, even as a lamb. Really playful, and she is still that way. I just love her. The next ewe I want to talk about is Tatiana. So she had her lambs the same day as Mabel, but we were there for her. She was later in the day. I actually was able to record her labor and birth of her lambs, and that's on that same lambing playlist from 2024. So that means she also conceived on the first day. So Tatiana, let's go over to her. I bred her to Duncan, and I call them the red ear tags. They were 3 last year, and I hadn't bred any of them, and there's a lot of really nice ewes in that year. So she was one of the ones. She had really good numbers when I looked at her length, density, and yield. And one of the ways I calculated yield was I weighed their full fleece with their neck wool and their breech wool and everything, and then I skirted them and I compared it, and if it was like 55, 60, that was pretty good. So anything in that and higher, I had a couple that were higher than that. I don't remember what her percent yield was, but it was really good. So she had twins. She had a spotted ram that was a fawn catmugget, so definitely spotted. Sometimes spotted sheep, you'll have lambs, especially new people will have lambs, and they'll have like a little sprinkle on their forehead, and their ears might be something, and they might have some sprinkles on their face, and it's like, oh, what's the pattern? What spotting is that? I wouldn't register that lamb as spotted. It's probably a spot carrier. When a lamb is spotted, the spots are really obvious. So in this guy, you can see he's got a eaglet marking there. He's got circles around his eyes. And you can see he's got dark here, and then the socket marking, which is the white legs with the dark body. So he's spotted. I would register him as a eaglet. So he's brown, so he's got lowercase b. He's spotted, lowercase s. Now, I know he's catmugget because both his parents were catmuggets. in the first space. But the second allele, I don't know. I don't know yet, right? What I do know, though, is that Tatiana, from this breeding, she carries spots because she threw a spotted ram. If she were homozygous for spotting, or for not spotting, she would have covered Duncan's recessive spotting, and the lamb would not have been spotted. Because he is spotted, she has to carry spots. And then I'm trying to remember, where would those spots have come from, because I don't remember her having spots. So I couldn't resist the temptation, and I did go up a generation to look at her parents. So she's out of Loki, who was a no pattern black ram, and Mira Reed, who was a fawn catmugget in their adult photos. And Tatiana is not spotted. So then I thought, you know what, I'm going to take a look at the lamb photos if I have them. I didn't have a lamb photo of Mira Reed, but I did have a lamb photo of Loki and Tatiana. And both of them had these little white sprinkles, I call them, little bits here and there. So they weren't registered as spotted, but they're probably spot carriers. So without going any further back, I mean, Rush is spotted. So that's, you know, going to be where he got that from. Mustang Sally and Darcy, neither of them were spotted. So maybe what, you know, Rush came down through, and that's where Tatiana got it. So I'm going to say that Loki, who's no longer with the flock, I'm going to say he was a spot carrier, and that went down to Tatiana, because then Tatiana produced that spotted ram. So she now carries spots, and I learned that because of her ram. I also learned that Tatiana carries no pattern, because I went back and looked at Loki, and he was no pattern. So she has to carry no pattern. And because of that, as I'm looking at this, the ram also is going to be a no pattern carrier, because he could either be a no pattern carrier from his parents or no pattern, which he's not. So he carries no pattern. Ugh, it's so interesting. I just love this stuff. All right, so the lamb they had is a fawn catmugget ewe, doesn't have spots. So she didn't really give us a lot of information, but that little ram really, he delivered when it comes to learning more about its genetics. So Tatiana's ewe is a little bit on the shy side, which is fine, because I've got a lot of friendly lambs, so I barely can get anything done in the barn when they're in there, so it's probably a good thing. The little ram, though, is so aggressive. He, when he comes in at night, his head is totally bald, and that's just from all of the roughhousing he does and bashing his head against other sheep and stuff. Many times it's got blood on it. So he's starting to get what they call honor wounds, just like little bits of scarring and stuff. He'll take on an adult ewe in that barn. And he's really, I mean, he's little. He's going to kill himself. I fully expect to either see him dead or, I don't know. I'm really anxious about, you know, when it comes time to put the ram lambs in a pen, how he's going to behave. He's definitely going to go to market. I would never use him in breeding, because I don't like that trait. I don't want, I mean, you know, I don't want that temperament to carry through. And I wouldn't sell him as a breeding ram either because of the aggression. I don't know what he's going to do. So he's, unfortunately, he does not have a good future ahead of him. But the little Lammy, she's certainly a keeper. Love her. So I'm glad Tatiana had a chance to do something. Usually fawn catmuggets, because I have a lot of fawn. They don't normally get into the breeding queue, but I'm really happy she got a chance. I like how she looks. The next lambs to arrive were out of Lucia and Sebastian, a white ram and a white ewe. So all through lambing, my pretty clear goal out of Sebastian was to get a white ram. I like Sebastian's body. I like the length of his body, and I also like his fleece. It's really nice. He's got great structure. So there's a lot I like about him. So I'd like to get a white ram out of him that I could then put on the AIUs that are mostly UK genetics. So there's not a lot of relationship there. And work to improve the fleeces on the AI lambs while, you know, just capitalizing on the density of those lovely fleeces that we got out of the AIUs. So Lucia, she was a yearling when I bred her, so a year and whatever, 8 months. And now as I'm looking at her, I'm thinking that she was probably too small also. So I'm very likely only going to do 2-year-olds next time I breed with a live ram. It's just, and Rosine was the other yearling I bred that last year, she's the one that had the miscarriage. So not sure if I can draw a correlation there, but that's cause and effect. It's just I have a feeling about it. But Lucia, I had to breed her because her fleece was so lovely. It's just this gorgeous, really fine, good length, just a really nice fleece. And so I was kind of intrigued to see what we would get out of that breeding. This year we did really well with white ewes. I got 4 white ewes. I think in the last segment I said that was 3, but there were actually 4. We had one out of Tovia, who was a twin, one out of Lucretia, who was also a twin, who I can easily tell her. She looks very unique. Out of Lucia, and then the single out of Hermione. And before I started doing this work, I was really having a hard time distinguishing those 3. Now I think I have a pretty good feel for it. Lucia's ewe is smaller than the other ones by just a little bit. And her fleece is really soft, but it doesn't feel dense. That might be just because it is so fine, but we're going to keep an eye on that. The ram has really tiny skurs out of Lucia and Sebastian, which isn't a surprise because Sebastian has skurs as well, although they're a little bit bigger. These ones look like they're going to end up, the lambs are going to end up staying as buttons. Either way, it doesn't really matter. And the nice thing about these 2 lambs is they really hang with their mom. You know, I was trying to look at Tovia's white ewe to make sure I knew, that it was her. And normally at this age, they're still kind of hanging with their mothers, so you can kind of guess who they're out of if there's any question. Tovia is on one side of the barn and her lambs are like scattered everywhere. So it's really weird. But Lucia's, they really kind of hang together. So it's fun to see the different behaviors with the sheep, even at this early age. So when I look at the genetics for Lucia's lambs, I'm going to start with Sebastian. He is out of Audi, who is a black ewe. She was not spotted and she was no pattern. And Sebastian's sire is Knightley, who is a fawn, non-spotted catmugget. So I know a lot about Sebastian's parents, but what we end up with Sebastian is he carries brown, which is from his mother, because his mother was out of Nitro, who was a brown ram. He is spotted, and you can see it. Look at, on his face. That's a spot, and that it's not like that, left him after he was a lamb. He was a really, really flashy lamb. And you can see he's got the little socks. Those are indicators of a spotted sheep. And he is catmugget, but he carries no pattern. So I don't really remember. It'll be interesting to see if he threw any no pattern lambs. I don't think he did. I mean, maybe the white ones are, but it's going to be hard to tell. So when you look at Lucia's 2 lambs, they're both white. The ram has got little black patches on his back legs. Leads me to think that maybe he's black based, and that's just showing through the white. But other than that, all we're really able to tell from their phenotype is that they are white, AWT, with a question mark because they could be carrying a bunch of different things. Lucia is out of Ilara and Harry, 2 white sheep. Now, we know a lot of stuff about Harry because he's given us a good crop of lambs. Ilara, it's a little tricky because she's from a different flock. But I know her sire was white and her mother was a spotted gray catmugget. So I can get a little bit of information from that. I got that from the NASA database because I didn't remember very much about her.
So in the NASA database search site, I was able to find Ilara just by typing in her name, and there's the info on the sire, the ram, and there's the information on her dam, the ewe.
So I spent some time, I did end up researching Ilara a little bit more, just because I'm I'd like to get some information on these lambs. So like I said, her dam was a gray catmugget and was spotted. So that means that she was black based, but we don't know if she was homozygous or heterozygous with the information that I have right now. She was spotted, so she's homozygous for spotting, 2 lowercase s's, and she was a catmugget, but we don't know what she carried. And Yarrow, all we know about him was that he was white. So when you put those two together, the only thing we can really get from it is because she came out of a spotted ewe, she's carrying spots, Ilara. And she's probably black. And I say that because I was processing her fleece and working on it right now, actually. And I'll show you there's a lock, and there's like black wool in it. So it's very likely she's black, but is she homozygous or heterozygous? I don't know. So the other thing I did after I looked at Ilara's parents to get bits and pieces is I looked at Ilara's lambs. So she's had quite a few lambs for us. And I went back to when she joined the farm in 2016. She's joined us as a lamb, which I didn't realize that. But we bred her as a lamb. She must have been on the bigger side because her first lamb, I couldn't find anything in the registry, but that's only because I didn't register all her lambs. Some of her lambs were rams and they wouldn't get registered many times. But I did find, when I was looking through my photo archives, her first lamb she had for us was a black Yuglet, no pattern ram. So I mean, all 3 really interesting bits of information for us that we can use to characterize Ilara's genetics. So there's the ram. He left the farm. I don't know if I don't think he's still alive. I think he's gone, but it doesn't really matter because he's going to tell us a lot of stuff about Ilara. Now, that ram is out of Nitro, and Nitro is super easy to characterize because he is brown, spotted, no pattern. So it's all the recessives. So it's easy to get a good full genotype on Nitro. Ilara, on the other hand, all we know about her is she carries spots and she's white. So she got the spotted ram. Let's take a look at this next slide. So that's that. And we know he's no pattern. And he was black. We know that the black had to come from Ilara because Nitro is recessive homozygous brown. And we also know that Ilara has to carry no pattern. So we learned a couple things about Ilara from this little lamb that I dug out of the deep, dark archives. All right, so that's what we got. So let's go back now and see if that helps us, what we now know about Ilara being a black ewe, carrying spots, and carrying no pattern. Putting her against Harry. And unfortunately, we still don't know anything about Lucia, and therefore pretty much the only thing we know about Lucia's lambs are that she had white lambs, AWT pattern. So I'm just going to double check this, but there in every instance is a possibility that it's an unknown, and so you have to say it's, you can do probabilities like she's 50% likely to be black. But then she could also, these question marks here could be, Ilara could be homozygous for black. She only had that one colored lamb. Everything else she's had has been white. Spotting, there's still questions about that. Lucia could be spotted, or she could be not spotted, carrying spots. She could also be homozygous for not spotted. And she's got all sorts of possibilities with pattern. So this time we don't have any information about Lucia. But that's okay. So I'm excited about these lambs' fleeces. We're going to keep the white ram probably through to next year, depending on how he does in the evaluation. I've let white rams go to auction for things like, narrow hips, stuff that was just kind of an automatic disqualifier. So we're going to keep an eye on this white ram, but he's got a couple things in his favor. One is that he's out of Sebastian, and he's white, and Lucia's really soft, so he's probably going to have a really great fleece. So we'll see. We're watching the white ram. The white ewe, she's got a spot in the flock because we needed to bump up the white numbers, and she'll give us a nice white fleece. If she falls off, or if her fleece is really open, maybe in a couple of years we'll look at her as a possible contender for moving on to another farm where those qualities aren't a disqualifier. So that is Lucia's little family. The next ewe that had a lamb is Brunhild. Brunhild and Harry had a single gray catmugget ewe. Brunhild is a gray catmugget. Harry is white. We know a lot about Harry because of all the lambs he's produced over the years, and they've given us quite a bit of information about his genotype. The only thing we are missing is what color he is, and that's because he has thrown brown lambs when bred with a black ewe, but we've never seen a black lamb come out of him when bred with a brown ewe, which would tell us that he is a heterozygous for black carrying brown. So with this lamb, we didn't really get very much information. The one thing about Brunhild's ewe is that she does have a lot of spotting on her face, but to me it looks like the type of spotting that when she turns into an adult that will fade. And so what it indicates most of the time is that she's a spot carrier, which is a possibility because both Harry and Brunhild carry spots. Brunhild is carrying spots. I'm trying to remember where that came from. I think that came from her grandfather, Yuki's sire. But when you looking at Brunhild's photo right here, this is her adult photo. You don't see any spotting, right? But when you look at Brunhild's lamb photo, she had quite a lot of little flecks and speckles. I didn't register her as spotted, but you can see that there's something there. So definitely both of the parents of this ewe are carrying spots, so we're going to register her as not spotted. And she is a catmugget, but it's not clear whether she is carrying no pattern or if she is homozygous for catmugget. So she didn't really give us any information that we didn't already have on Harry. She is an absolutely precious, friendly, really happy, bouncy ewe, really playful. Even now, she comes running up to me in the barn to say hello and get some scritches. And I think she's going to end up with a really lovely fleece. How could she not? Brunhild's fleece was remarkable, and Harry, as you know, is one of our finest rams we've ever bred with. So she's definitely a keeper, and looking forward to seeing the fleece that she produces next year. Tovia was the next ewe to have a lamb, so she had her lamb on the 26th, the day after Brunhild's. And Tovia was the one, she had her lambs early in the morning, and we weren't there for their delivery. And that was the time where Ty tried to steal the lambs from Tovia. Fortunately, there was no fallout from that at all. Everything was fine. Tovia had a white ewe and a fawn catmugget ram. We bred Tovia to Harry. We'd done this breeding before, and that's where we got Tosca, that amazing white ewe that I absolutely love everything about her, including her very cantankerous temperament. She just has no time for me at all, and I think it's fantastic. But anyway, so they're both pretty keep to themselves. The fawn ram, he's really very businesslike. The white ewe, she's lovely. I'm sure she'll be terrific. I don't see any issues with her right now. When we take a look, let's take a quick look at the genotype from Harry's group. So genotype, if you remember, that's the genetic makeup. So both of the alleles, both genes, what they are they a carrier of something recessive or what? Okay, so Tovia is out of Sybil and Nitro. Sybil is a solid, she's a no pattern Moret ewe. And Nitro was a spotted no pattern Moret. So really easy. Whenever there's a lot of recessive traits showing, you know they're homozygous for that recessive trait. So Tovia is homozygous for brown, the recessive. She carries spots because she's out of Nitro. So Nitro is lowercase s, lowercase s. Anytime you have a homozygous recessive sheep, their offspring is going to carry one of those recessive genes, in this case spotting. So Tovia is a spot carrier, and Tovia has no pattern, so it's easy. She's AA. And then Harry, we know, carries brown, so the chances of getting a brown offspring was pretty high with these two. This would have been the chance for Harry to show us that he's a black ram, once again, a brown lamb. So it's starting to look more and more like Harry is a brown ram. I'll have to have Rich take a look at those numbers and tell me what the odds are of us getting this many brown rams. It's going to be pretty low. And that is probably the only way we're going to be able to know he is black. And the sad thing is we're probably done using him now because he's really had a lot of lambs. We've got a lot of his lambs. The Catmugget ram, so he is Catmugget and he carries no pattern because of his mother being homozygous for no pattern. We don't know if he's carrying spots for sure. Can't really tell based on what we have here. He could be homozygous for non-spotted or he could carry spots, so we don't really know for sure. And like I said, these lambs, they aren't really putting themselves out to get to know me. I don't think the white one is one of my friendlies. I've got two friendly white ewes and I think they're out of Hermione, and I know the one is out of Lucia, the little tiny one. Little peanut. But they're doing well, and the white ewe, obviously she's going to stay with the flock for a few years till we get a chance to do a good evaluation on her. The ram, likely he will be either going off to another farm for breeding if somebody's interested in those genetics, or more likely probably just go to market after we do our evaluation, because we're not going to be using fawn rams. He's really related to most of the stuff in our flock, so not a great outcome for the little guy, but he's having a nice summer. So that is Tobia's little family, Tovia and Harry. The next lamb was out of Carrie. If you remember, Carrie is the one, she had the twins, and the second lamb didn't thrive. Not sure exactly what happened there, but the little fawn ewe that's survived and is thriving has turned out to be incredibly friendly, and I believe it's because I spent so much time in her stall that it's possible there was some imprinting going on, because I was in there a lot not really paying attention to her. It's funny when I go back and look for footage of this little fawn Catmugget out of Carrie to show you what she looked like as a newborn. There's not very much other than her in the background because I was so focused on this little sister. But it's really rewarding. This little lamb, every time, like even if she's out on the pasture, she'll do a little double take, she's like, what's that over there? Oh, it's her. And she comes running over to say hello. So she's super friendly and sweet. She is out of Sebastian. So we take a look at those genetics kind of quickly here. It's most of the ewes, most of the offspring aren't really giving us a lot of information. So one thing we do know, so Carrie, this lamb's mother, is gray, as is Sebastian. And the lamb is brown, which means they both have to carries brown. They both carry brown. So we learned that, and it was interesting because Carrie is out of Eleanor and Jon Snow, and those are two gray Catmuggets. So the brown has come through from a prior generation. Spotting, unsure, don't know. And pattern, I know that Carrie is a Catmugget, but I don't know what the other gene is for Carrie. She could be no pattern or homozygous for Catmugget. And the lamb she got was a Catmugget, so I can't really derive anything from that. if it was a no pattern, then I would have known that Carrie carries no pattern. So chances are Carrie's going to be carrying Catmugget. She had a great Catmugget lamb, her other lambing, so it's very likely she's just a Catmugget, homozygous for Catmugget. So that is that little dear sweet thing that I love very much. The next lamb, we're kind of banging through these now. We got through some of the basics. Came out of Paulina. Okay, so this is Paulina and Sebastian's little ram. And he is really a looker. He's got Rich. He's turned Rich's head. So he is a no pattern black spotted ram. So the fact that he is spotted means that he is homozygous for the recessive spotting, lowercase s, lowercase s. And you know that because you can just see it. He's got a very well-defined smerslet, will be that marking when I register him. I'll call him smerslet. Smerslet is where they have a spot on their head and a spot on their nose. And many times there's a little blaze that connects the two spots, but really all you need is a good spot on the nose and a good spot on the pole. He is also no pattern. That's the recessive of the 5 patterns. So the fact that we've got a lamb here that's giving us so much recessive is going to tell us some stuff about the parents. And for certain we learned that Paulina carries spots. Thank you to this little spotted ram. He would not have been able to have spots, is that right? If she were not a spot carrier. Yeah, that is right. So that's something we learned about Paulina. This is Paulina's first lamb. It's possible she'll have more lambs. We tend to have a hard time getting black, which I don't understand because black is dominant. But, you know, when we bred Paulina to Sebastian, Paulina being a no pattern and Sebastian being a Catmugget, chances were high that we'd get a Catmugget lamb. We didn't. We got the no pattern. And he is really fancy. Rich calls him Trotter because when he was littler and they do the lamb frolics, he would break into a trot instead of the crazy galloping that they do. And he just has so much stature. The way he stands, the way he holds his head. Sometimes with spotted lambs, they look more striking just because of the spotting pattern. So you really have to look beyond that for the frame and the structure. Locola is his grandmother, and Locola came to us from another farm, from OK Acres, and we liked Locola's nice frame. Locola had a really great black ram before, so we're getting a lot of really good frame out of that line. And of course, putting Paulina with Sebastian just amplifies that. So it's possible this guy might stick around. He might be overwintered. He's got little buds, horn buds, which doesn't surprise us at all. Sebastian is kind of closer to our older genetics before we really got into the polled, homozygous polled sheep. Sebastian's got those skers, and Locola is a horned, she's horned ewe, I guess, but she doesn't have horns. But, she's, let me see, homozygous for not polled as a female. Horn genetics are kind of weird. Even though Paulina doesn't have horns, this ram that she threw has got little black and white horn buds. And he's just so cool. I really like him. So that was Paulina's breeding, and like I said, we learned that she is a spot carrier. So that's great. And something new that we learned. The next lamb to arrive was out of Ty and Harry. Thank goodness, because Ty was beside herself wanting to have a baby so badly. This was Ty's second lamb. But she just was really energized about the whole thing this year for some reason. She gave us a really nice fawn Catmugget ram, and he was really big size. I don't really spend a lot of time with him, and to be honest, I have a hard time distinguishing between him and the other fawn Catmugget that we had out of Tovia. So I don't spend a lot of time, I've said this before, but I don't spend a lot of time with my ram lambs, and the reason is I just don't want them to become accustomed to being around people that are friendly and that they don't have to be afraid of or cautious of. Because what's going to happen is that one day, usually during breeding season, I'm going to have my back turned thinking he's a nice, gentle ram, and something will click and he will decide that I'm an intruder in his pen and a competitor for other ewes, and he will smash my knees out. And I know a lot of people say, oh, you know, my ram is the sweetest can be, and that's great, and it happens, but there is a risk, and it's not worth it for me to take that risk. And I've heard stories of people that consistently had gentle rams and had, you know, would play with them, whatever. And then there was that one ram that put him out of commission for a little bit, and I just can't afford that. And also, a lot of the rams that we breed and a lot of lambs that we have here on the farm, I'll move on to other farms. And I really don't want to be responsible for creating a ram that's not afraid of people that attack somebody at a new farm. So I just don't, you know, I watch them from afar, but they're really not on my radar. We do a really good, thorough evaluation of rams later in the fall when it comes time to decide who's going to stay over the winter and who's going to go to market. So that's kind of when I really focus on the ram. And at that time, we'll take a fiber sample and we'll send that into the lab. Even though we just get a very small bit of wool, it's still another piece of data. And if you watch this channel enough, you know that data is it's pretty important to me, and I treasure every little last bit of information I can get to help make decisions because it's hard. So I am overwintering Paulina's ram lamb. Quite certain about that. So that means I might as well overwinter other ram lambs. So this guy could be one of those, but we'll just have to see. A lot more data collection and time has to go by before that. So as far as what he's told us from a genetic standpoint, this, you know, he was out of Harry, and this was Harry's big test. So if Harry bred to a spotted ewe through a non-spotted lamb, that would have told us that Harry is not spotted. We already know that he carries spots. So this ram isn't spotted. He's got a little smidge of something, but it's already gone. So he carries spots from his mother Ty, who is homozygous for spotting, so she's going to always pass one on to her offspring.
So now we know that Harry being bred to a spotted ewe, getting a non-spotted offspring, that Harry is not spotted, but he carries spots or is heterozygous for spotting.
So this ram is not spotted, and he's a catmugget, but he could carry no pattern from Ty. He could be no pattern or catmugget carrying. So not a ton of data here genetically, but I don't know. It's always interesting when you got white sheep in the equation. Then soon after Ty came Rosalind. So Rosalind is a gray catmugget ewe, and she's out of Rosemary, who is a white ewe that we purchased from another farm, and John Snow. So she ended up being a gray catmugget. So she is uppercase B, lowercase I don't know, and the question mark there is attributed to Rosemary. I didn't look at her parents to see what she was, so she's white, so there's a whole lot of question marks there when it comes to Rosalind. Rosalind is not spotted, and she's catmugget, so she's got a question mark on the second allele for every single one of the ones that I'm keeping an eye on. So two gray catmugget rams with really soft fleeces. I was handling them the other day, and really soft and silky. So this is a question I get frequently, which is, do you ever wether the rams if you get a really fine ram? Another question I get too is, are ewes finer than rams ever? And I would say unequivocally no. It seems like always the case, not as much anymore, but in the past when we were struggling to get the super fine quality, that the rams were always much finer than the ewes. This was probably 6-7 years ago. Very frustrating, and that was the luck of the draw. I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that a ram is finer than a ewe. But the question of weathering rams is, we don't weather rams now, and I used to weather rams, but as far as that goes, the only reason I keep rams outside is I don't have any other alternative. I don't like having them outside, and if I hear the coyotes in the middle of the night, I'm worried about them. So the fewer number of animals I have to leave outside, the more comfortable I am. So adding a wether or two in with the rams doesn't really appeal to me. So that's number one. Number two is I've weathered rams and I know for certain it hurts. I can see their behavior. Once you let go of that band and it snaps tight around, they kind of cringe, go off into the corner, kind of like with a limp, and they're down for about a day. Now, that's probably because we don't weather babies. We would wait to see, back in the past, if it was something that we wanted to keep as a ram. But I just know that it hurts them. And, people have asked me, is ruing, does that hurt the sheep? I don't think it does. I mean, I've seen ewes that I've rued, and they just stand there as chill as could be. Other ewes, I don't think it's that it hurts them. I think that they're just really flighty and aren't used to that kind of stimulation. But the weathering, I know it hurts. So I don't know. I think the last time we did it, I was just sick to my stomach, and we decided we weren't going to do it any longer. So if somebody wants a ram to turn into a wether from our farm, it's fine. I just, I'm going to sell them to you intact, unregistered, and you can take care of weathering. And you can actually weather, or after they reach a certain age, you have to do it surgically in order to castrate them. You can do them at any age. That was what my vet had advised me. So if that's something that you want to do, you can. But anyway, so these two gray rams, I don't really have any plans to use a gray catmugget ram for a while. We used John Snow a lot, and he was a gray catmugget and gave us a lot of gorgeous gray cats. I'd like to try and get some, really super fine Moritz next and focus on that. But we'll see. I mean, if one of these two lambs comes out with a super long body and really dense, long fleece, that might tip the scales a little, because that's really over color. That's kind of my priority. Didn't get a whole lot of information about either parent from them. We already knew quite a lot about Sebastian. I think one of the ram lambs could be spotted. He's got a pretty dramatic face. It'd be all about, does that stay as he gets bigger? A lot of times even that much flash tends to blend and fade away. So that is Rosalind's two little sweet boys. Hermione was the next ewe, and this was Hermione's first lamb. Hermione was a 2-year-old, so that red tag group that I talk about, that I was really excited to see some lambs out of them. Hermione is out of, again, another purchased ewe. Her name was Soshi. We sold Soshi, I believe. And I don't really know a lot about Soshi's parent. I didn't look into it. I could easily look into it, but I didn't. But I do know Hermione's sire is out of a spotted ram. So Knightley carried spots. And so therefore, I think I've got Hermione down as carrying spots just because she's got a lot of spots in her lamb photo. She looks kind of a little bit flashy. So I went ahead and said that she's carrying spots. But her offspring, I don't really know very much, other than the fact that I know for sure that the white lamb out of Hermione and Harry carries catmugget. And that's because Harry carries catmugget, and because Soshi and Knightley were both catmuggets. And so I'm pretty sure that Hermione is homozygous for catmugget. And she's a really sweet ewe. She has a lot of pink around her eyes. There's not a lot of wool close up to her eyes, so that's how I can recognize her. And she's a little bit bigger because she was a single. Really sweet. The next ewe to have a lamb then was Lucretia. And Lucretia had twins. And I think I did share this with everybody, that one of the twins passed. She didn't make it. She had some very strange condition. We did quite a bit of testing and sent samples in to Cornell for just evaluation to see what was wrong, to find out if there was something we could do to help her. But there wasn't, and she just got worse and worse, so we decided to put her out of her misery, and we put her down, which was really hard. But got a gray lamb out of Lucretia. So let me just go over here and see. I think, yes, Lucretia was with Sebastian, because if you remember, I was really hoping to get a little ram out of Lucretia and Sebastian. But having the gray catmugget, so the genetics, what we learned out of Lucretia having a gray catmugget lamb, is that she is black. I don't know if she's heterozygous or homozygous for black, but her first allele is capital B. And we also know, because she had a catnugget, that she carries catnugget. So she's a white AWT-AB. So we did get a little information from this little gray lamb that helped us understand a little bit more about Lucretia. And Lucretia also had a white ewe out of Sebastian, and she's doing really well. Very sweet. So that was that pairing. And then the last one to go was Belva. Belva had her lamb on May 18th, so it was like 2 weeks after Lucretia. And it was kind of tricky. Lucretia was in her pen for longer than we normally would, her lambing jug, just because we were working on that gray lamb to see if we could help her. And so we got a little bit concerned because it was getting hot too. And so just getting concerned about the health of the white lamb and Lucretia being kind of cooped up in that pen for all that time. It was a couple weeks that they were in there before we actually had to make the call on the lamb. So added that to when Belva had her ram. That ram didn't really get a lot of time in the jug before he was out on the pasture. Like all the other lambs had quite a bit of time in the barn, in that one little nursery section and stuff. But Belva's boy, he was like, you know, he had like 2 days, and then it was time to send everybody out, and he did just fine. Belva's a really good mom. Pretty sure this was her first lamb. I think she had a miscarriage her first time, but she did really well with this little guy. And I think when I have the footage of him out in the barn, you know, he's kind of getting knocked around a little bit, but yeah, it's not bad. So when you look at Belva, this lamb from Belva is out of Sebastian. Can't really get a whole lot of information. Doesn't really matter though, because I got the white ram out of Sebastian. And he does look as if he might be black. He's got a lot of black shading, like his nose is black and around his eyes and stuff. It's darker color. So, and it doesn't look like he's getting any kind of horn buds or anything, any scurs or anything. So that's interesting. Horn genetics is a lot more complicated. There's a lot more locations on the chromosome for determining what the horns are going to look like. So it's a little more complicated. You just kind of, unfortunately, we're breeding for polled rams, hornless rams, and it's dominant. So it works out nicely for us. So that is lambing for 2024. We had an even number at the end, live sheep, of 8 ewes and 8 rams, so 16 lambs total. And the next thing we have to do, we did our CDT shots, our first round. We'd like to do that at somewhere between 8 to 10 weeks. And CDT is just a vaccination that we give them. It helps prevent or ward off tetanus. And we give the mother CDT in the spring when they're pregnant, when they're due to lamb. So there's a little CDT that transfers over in their bloodstream to the lamb. And then this one shot at 8 weeks. And then we do another one, I don't know, 4 to 6 weeks later. I know it's still in the summer. It's still really hot when we do it. 16 lambs isn't bad. There was one year we had 35 lambs. It was a nightmare. The second CDT shot, we're going to do the ear tags. I've already purchased them. We're using the white color this year, so they don't have any white ear tags out there right now. And, you know, I like to wait until all the CDTs have been given before I puncture them with an ear tag. A lot of farms have to tag their lambs right out of the gate because they have so many, and there's, you know, like they're all white. You know, so it's really difficult to distinguish. For me, I know most of my lambs and who their mothers are by that time. And if there's any doubt, we have a couple tricks we do. One thing we'll do is we'll isolate the question lambs. Let's say I can't tell between the 2 white ewe lambs. I'll put them in a section of the barn with their mothers. And by that time, they've pretty much gone independent. They don't really nurse that often or whatever, but every so often they do. So we put them over there in an isolated area and just kind of watch them and watch their behavior. And normally one of them will nurse, and you're like, ah, that's the pair, pull them out, and then the other ones. And then you can kind of look at them and you're like, yeah, that's right, that's Lucretia's ewe or whatever. I'm going to know Lucretia's Lou. I think the only ones I'm going to maybe have some confusion about is Hermione and Tovia's white lamb. But I might have enough time with them between now and then to be able to distinguish between the two of them. There will be an auction trip, so we're going to do the ram evaluation, get the samples, and then finally make a decision. So there'll be a trip down to Springville where I just take the lambs down there. I used to have people come out to the farm that just got to be really unwieldy, logistically bad. A lot of times people would say they were coming and I'd get the rams separated out and ready to go, and it was hot and never showed up, or they keep on putting it off. So I don't like taking stuff to auction because I don't know where they're going, but normally they do get purchased by Muslims that are going to do the halal, which is a really humane, honorable butchering method. And so I don't know, it's one of those things, I guess. Registering them, so I'm going to be registering all of the ewes for certain, and there might be a couple rams. So for example, the little black and white one out of Paulina, if we do decide to use him, he has to be registered. So possibly that. It does cost a little bit more to register rams for some reason. I gotta name them, so we're going to be using the bird naming convention. So we'll have, you know, all sorts of fun with the lambs. I'll name all 16 of them, even the rams we're not going to keep, just because it's really fun to do. No selling. So I don't sell lambs, so none of these lambs are going to, ewe lambs are for sale. Ram lambs I will sell, but ewe lambs always overwinter 1 year. I'd always get a full fleece out of them to make the decision. Are they going to improve my flock? Are they going to be producing fleeces that hand spinners will love? Are they the type that we're breeding for? You need a year for that. It's just there's too many unknowns with lamb fleeces to not keep them for that full year, which kind of impacts us a little bit. A lot of farms sell lambs and they do really well selling livestock because they sell lambs, but it's not really our main thing, so it's okay. What else? Yeah, I think that's kind of it. So they're growing really fast. They're still really sweet, and I'm still enjoying getting to know them. They're so special, and they're just really fun. I always think about it. You know, Rich is 60, I'm 59, and there probably will be a time where we're going to say, you know, it's probably time to kind of let the flock stay where it is and no more lambs. But we're still dreaming, still have plans for next year. I'm buying a ram lamb, so definitely next year, but just something that I think about that makes me appreciate it even more. So all right, well, that is a wrap on lambs. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really appreciate you stopping by, and I hope you can come back soon.